If you guys are struggling to get your business to take off, then listen to this video because it's probably going to help you. So today I basically was working on not necessarily something I wanted to work on. And that's kind of the lesson in this video, is we don't always get to work on what we want to work on if we want to have maximum progress. And that's because when we're focused on signal, right? By the way, signal versus noise. So basically the noise is everything that's not going to move the needle forward, and signal is the thing that will move the needle forward, right? And so basically when we're actually focused on signal, then it's very important to understand that we don't always have the choices that one would have if the goal is to have maximum comfortability and not necessarily focus on signal, right? And so that's something key to understand, because the thing is, the business doesn't care about your feelings, it doesn't care about your emotions, it doesn't care about what you want, right? The business has certain needs, and you're either going to fulfill those needs and the marketplace is going to reward the business, or you're not going to fulfill those needs and the business is going to stay stuck because you're trying to be comfortable. So ultimately you have to be able to make a choice between those two things. You have to decide, either are we going to have maximum comfort, or are we going to have maximum progress? And so signal is not for everyone, right? Because it takes a mindset to be able to focus on the thing that actually moves the needle forward, right? Like I'm saying, it's not for everyone. So if your goal is not to grow at full velocity and to actually break records and to try to actually move the needle forward, then maybe this video is not for you. But if that is your goal, then I suggest listen up, right? Because like I'm saying, there's a certain mindset needed to actually move the needle forward in the business. And that is ultimately removing choice, right? Now, granted, to be able to focus on signal is by having the skill to decide, right? On what is the most important thing for the business. And that is a choice in and of itself, but it kind of ends there. That's where the choices end, right? Because ultimately it's not, you have to be able to remove the choice of comfort. And that's ultimately the choice that you don't have, right? If you want maximum efficiency, you cannot have comfort in that discussion, right? Because like I'm saying, the business doesn't have emotions. The marketplace doesn't care about how you feel. And if you're always going to be calibrating, and by the way, most business owners do this, they calibrate their actions based on their emotions. They calibrate their actions based on their what makes them feel good and what makes them comfortable. And that is the wrong calibration, right? You don't want to be calibrating on that. Because essentially 80%, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the things that actually move the business forward are not going to be pleasant for you. They're not going to be comfortable. They're not going to be fun. They're actually going to be pretty mundane and pretty boring, right? 20% of the time, you're going to have a little bit of fun because it's going to hit your passion, right? You're actually going to be able to work on things that make you passionate. And you're going to have fun, and it's going to be exciting, and there's going to be variety in that. And that's awesome, right? It's going to hit some of your human needs. But like I'm saying, 80% of the time, that's not going to be the case, right? 80% of the time, and this is what makes 80% of the difference, right? Is doing the boring, mundane things. That's what moves 80% of the business. And the thing is, most business owners do not do that 80%. And that's why their businesses grow at 1/5 of the pace of hyper-growth companies, right? It's because they're missing that other 80% due to comfort. And so this is, again, a key point about signal, right? And so I'll give you an example. Today, I run a cold email agency, and I had to decide, like, what is the signal? Well, one of the highest levers I could have walked on in my business today, we're sending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of emails per month. And so one of the biggest levers is like increasing how many positive replies we get per email we send, right? Because if we're sending hundreds of thousands of emails every single month, right, then if we can increase the quality of each email, it's going to dramatically increase how many positive replies we're getting. And positive replies, aka opportunities, is what leads to sales calls being booked onto the calendar, right? And so did I have all the fun in the world getting that optimized today? Quite frankly, no. So what I had to do was optimize the AI personalization, okay? And the thing is, the AI was acting really dumb today, right? And so it kept making mistakes. It was very boring, very mundane, very repetitive. And I basically just sat in this platform, okay, optimizing this AI probably 50 times over. And it failed and failed and failed and failed. And it was not fun. It was very boring, it was very mundane. But the thing is, before that session started, I had to sit down for 20 minutes and figure out what is the most important thing in the business, right? That's how I got to that conclusion that I had to focus on optimizing the AI, right? And so that process of deciding what to do before you actually get the work started, that is one of the highest levers you can do in business. And that is the act of depicting signal from noise, right? And ultimately that's what, the community that I'm running is all about. I've committed my life towards this community because I believe it's the strongest skill anybody can possess in business. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, this is their number one skills, right? They are the best at this, right? It's depicting signal from noise. Steve Jobs was, let's say 85% signal all the time, right? He was kind of a rude person. He's notorious for being that. But at the same time, he founded $1 trillion company. Very high signal. Obviously, Elon, also founder of $1 trillion company, Tesla, right? And probably soon to be multiple $1 trillion companies. And the thing is, like, Elon is like 99% signal. So that is what this group is all about. It's about mastering the skill of depicting signal from noise. So if you want to try that, 7 days free, click the link in the bio or in the description down below and check that out. It's going to be really, really life-changing for the people who actually join the group. But yeah, so hopefully that makes sense, guys. This is one of the most powerful skills that anybody can master in business. And again, I've committed my life towards this, right? Like, I've just pre-decided I'm willing to allocate the next 100,000 hours to mastering the skill, because every hour you spend working on the skill multiplies the end result, right? And that's why it's so powerful. And quite frankly, it's no secret or no surprise why both of the people who mastered the skill ended up having $1 trillion companies. Another example of someone who really mastered the skill was Thomas Edison, right? And Henry Ford. Both of them really, really high signal focused individuals. And now here's the thing. Just by trying to depict signal from noise, it doesn't mean that you're going to be good at it, right? Quite frankly, it's a very difficult skill to master. It's one of the most difficult skills to attempt to do, right? Accurately. And the reason why is because you have to be good at prediction. You have to be able to predict ahead of time. Because look, after the fact, it's very easy to know what was worthwhile committing to and what wasn't worth committing to. But before the time, that's where the most difficult part of this is, because you have to be strategic. And this is a strategic skill. And ultimately, strategy can be defined as unlimited options with limited resources, right? So you don't have unlimited time, right? Time is one of our resources. You probably also don't have unlimited money. So if you're taking time and money, which is one of the two most valuable resources, right? Other than attention, which is the third one, you have a finite amount of all three of those resources. So you have to be able to know how to be strategic in allocating those three resources. And ultimately, Elon, Steve, Henry Ford, and Thomas Edison were the best individuals when it came to allocating these three resources. And so depicting signal from noise and playing this game of strategy is the act of allocating those three resources. And the reason why I love our group called Signal It's basically a community where you can come in and you can leverage me and the people around in this community who is trying to master the skill, right? And essentially, like, while you're learning, you can also be implementing this thing, right? And that's why it's so powerful, because it's almost impossible not to multiply your business, right? If you are actually moving the needle forward. And the thing with most people with their businesses is they don't move it forward, right? They think they're moving it forward, but the thing is they're focused on noise. And so I want you to imagine, right, that it's like, I don't know if you've seen this analogy, but it's essentially putting rocks in a jar, right? And so you got sand and you got rocks. And so usually if I'm making my to-do list for the day, I'll even type on the to-do list, I'll type my 3 rocks for the day. Now, here's why it's so powerful. It's actually a law of life, right? And it works with like physics, and it works with like physical matter, which is really powerful. If you go and just Google or search on YouTube the analogy of, you know, the rocks in a jar with the sand, right? What you're gonna find is when you try to put, so let's say you have the exact amount of, you know, let's say you put 3 rocks, pick 3 big rocks in the jar, okay? And then you fill the rest of the jar around the rocks with sand. What's gonna happen is if you take out the sand and the rocks, and then you put the sand in first, the rocks are not gonna fit. And so what this analogy depicts is priorities and boundaries, right? So ultimately, what you wanna do is always take care of your rocks first, because your rocks in this example are signal, and the sand in this example is noise. And ultimately, we can think that we're productive when we're putting our sand in the jar, because we're thinking we're making progress, right? It's like, I think I moved the needle forward today. I put sand in a jar, right? And the jar is half full right now. That's pretty cool, right? And what's funny is like the sand takes up like 70% of the remaining capacity. But when you put in the rocks, it moves 70% of the business. It fills 70% of perceived to be what it looks like to be the jar, okay? But yeah, it's so interesting because like the sand is actually majority of the matter in the jar, but it has to work around the rocks. And like, again, this is a law. This is a law of nature. It's a law of life. It's physical matter, okay? In this example of like, it is physically impossible for the rocks to fit if you put the sand in first. It's not possible. The rocks will not fit, no matter how you try. The only possible way for the rocks and the sand to fit in the same jar, okay, is if you put the rocks in first. So it's very, very powerful. And again, like, you'll feel productive if you're putting the sand in the jar. But here's my question for you. Do you want to feel productive, or do you want to be productive? That's the question. And I want you to answer this for yourself, like real talk. Because many of you guys are feeling good about yourselves for putting sand in a jar. But putting sand in the jar is not going to get you paid. Putting sand in the jar is not going to increase your company's annual EBITDA. Putting sand in the jar is not going to increase your company's valuation, which is ultimately going to make or break your lifelong wealth, right? So that's what this is about, guys. It's about, so what this group is for, right? And the reason why I'm committed to this skill, right, is ultimately being able to identify out of 10 or 20 priorities in the day, like 10 options, 20 options, which one of these are the rocks and which one of these are sand. Because the thing is, it doesn't seem obvious at first. All of them look like rocks. So what it actually looks like in reality, and why this skill is so difficult and why most people can't do it, is because they look at 20 rocks. It looks like 20 individual rocks. And the funny thing is, 3 out of the 20 are actual rocks. They're actual signal things to do. 17 out of 20 are fake. They're sand. It's noise. And again, that's why this is such a strategic skill. Also why it's so rare, because it's so difficult to execute on, right? But ultimately, once you can actually execute on the skill, the whole world unlocks for you, right? It unlocks for you completely. Why? Because you're now instantly 7 times more productive, right? And that is why this is so powerful. So if you guys want to check it out, try it 7 days free, click the link below, and it's no risk to you. And I'll see you guys on the other side. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in another video. Cheers.